This is Decarbonize the World with Frank Deline, solving the climate crisis while increasing profits in your business. Here's Frank.
I'm back with Norman Crowley. We've been talking about his journey as a serial entrepreneur and climate change advocate, and what led him to founding the energy efficiency and decarbonization company CoolPlanet. Norman, pardon the pun, but I want to make a hard left turn here and talk about classic cars. I became a pro race car driver at 64 years old, racing in the Trans Am series, and I collect classic cars. And coincidentally, in 2021, you founded Ava, a company that transforms some of the world's most desirable classic cars to electric. What is Ava's mission, and how does it differ from companies in the automotive industry?
Yeah, so there's multiple reasons for Ava. At a pure climate level, solving climate change, 20 something percent of, it depends on who measures it, of the climate problem is transport. And electric vehicles are one of the silver bullets in that area, right? So
Right.
electric vehicles, hydrogen, but mainly electric actually. And we wanted to deeply understand electrics. No point in just talking about it. You really got to roll up your sleeves, get the spanners out and figure out how this stuff works. And so how better to do that than build your own car company? We're huge admirers of Tesla, huge fans of Elon. And so we didn't want to mimic that, though. We felt we were a little bit late to the party as well. And like you, I have a collection of classic cars, and I didn't feel, being in the climate change thing, that storming down the road with the sound of a V8 was a good look for me. And so I said, why don't we take some of the most beautiful classics in the world and convert them to electric?
Right.
And not just do that, but why don't we work with some of the most iconic car designers in the world in doing that? So one of the most iconic creators of muscle cars in America is Peter Brock. Peter
Yeah.
created Shelby Daytona. He
Yeah.
was the original designer of the Corvette C2. And
Yeah.
so somebody else, Ian Callum in the UK, designed the Aston Martin Vanquish. And so why don't we work with people like that on this, right? And so we created some of the most beautiful electric cars in the world. So, and if you go on to studioava.com, you can see those cars. And we're not trying to do what Elon is trying to do, which is sell millions of cars. In fact, our goal in terms of beautiful cars is to only make 6 vehicles a year. But they are 6 of the most beautiful vehicles that you will ever see. And each vehicle has to have a story. Yep. So
Absolutely. Yep.
yeah. And so I'll tell you some. So there was a captain in the British Army called Stuart Croxford. When he was 26, he was in Afghanistan. And he drove over an IED, an improvised explosive device.
Right.
And the vehicle exploded, and he lost his leg. And within a year of losing his leg, he completed an Ironman triathlon. Not a disabled Ironman triathlon, but actually a full triathlon.
Wow.
And so we were fascinated with the courage that it would take and the determination to do this. And so we started working with Stuart, and we took a Land Rover Defender, which was the vehicle that he was driving when he blew up, and we rebuilt it as a high performance electric Defender. So 0 to 60, 3 seconds. And then we not only built the vehicle, and this is, you can see this on the Studio Ava website, but also then to do the impossible, we agreed with Stu that we would try and break the record from cycling from one end of Great Britain to the other, which is 2,000 kilometers. And Stu and the vehicle, we raced in 250 hours across the full length of Britain, from what's called Land's End to John O'Groats. And we produced a documentary, which is coming out later this year, called 250 Hours, about that. So that's the kind of thing we do with AVA. Is AVA stands for Ad Vitam Aeternum. So, and what that means is for life eternal, right? And what we're
Uh-huh.
trying to do there is not just make beautiful vehicles with brilliant people, but also so much of climate change centers around anger at people, and then also a lot of people who work in climate change, they always talk about, life should be that we should live without, we should do less, we should turn down our thermostat or turn up our thermostat, we should wear a woolly jumper, we shouldn't drive these fancy cars. And we
Hmm.
don't believe that is not how the human spirit evolved. The human
Right.
spirit evolved from better, faster, more beautiful, right? And we believe climate change should also embody that. And so AVA's mission is to inspire and to get people talking and to say, have you seen that car? It's the most beautiful car, but it's electric, right? And to challenge people about what's possible. Yeah? And so every AVA story defies logic and defies and shows people what's possible. And
Yeah.
that's normally embodied in a very beautiful and overpriced electric vehicle.
Yeah, and it's my goal to race electric vehicles. I'm waiting for the sanctioning bodies. See, there's two sanctioning bodies in road racing,
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
SCCA and NASA. They still haven't developed a class for it, and that would be awesome for me. You know what interests me about electric and road racing is that the instantaneous torque that you have with electric is just it's just so conducive to road racing, and
Yes.
I'm really looking forward to doing that.
So we're building a GT car with Peter Brock at the moment,
Uh-huh.
electric, and this thing is going to be something, right? And we are going to race it in Le Mans, against the gasoline GT cars, like from McLaren and Jaguar and all these people, in the races that they already have. And what we're doing is it's not allowed to race in them currently.
Yeah,
So
I
we're
know.
gonna we're gonna create so much profile about this vehicle that we're gonna force them to let us race. And we
Cool.
already have two or three of the very famous European GT drivers committing to race these vehicles. So again, climate change doesn't happen unless you push the envelope, even when the envelope doesn't want to be pushed. Yeah.
Right. Well, I'm going to follow this. By the way, this
Mhm.
really interests me, and it's something I think I want to eventually get involved in.
Brilliant. Yeah, yeah.
So, how does Ava aim to create cars with the lowest carbon footprint and the least impact on the planet? I've done some work here in measuring the carbon footprint of electric vehicle on a fossil fuel grid. And the numbers aren't that great. And I'm suggesting if you do have an electric car, that you need to have renewable energy as a source of energy for that
Mhm.
car to really make it make sense. Do you believe the
Mhm.
same?
So the biggest study that's ever been done has been done by the Norwegian government, and what
Oh,
that
okay, there you
tell
go.
yeah, and like this is a 70-page report, and it's downloadable on the internet. And what it tells, also there's been a study done by the British government, and what it says that is that in the worst, most fossil fuel intensive grid, so somewhere like Poland, which has a 98% coal fired grid,
Okay.
an electric vehicle is still 30% more efficient on a full life cycle basis. So that's mining cobalt and nickel to make the batteries versus a gasoline powered car, all the way through the life of the vehicle, scrapping the vehicle in the end, recycling where you can, and comparing a full gasoline powered vehicle with a fully electric vehicle. And in that worst case scenario for the electric vehicle, because it's a carbon intensive grid, the electric is still 30% more efficient.
That's when you do an entire life cycle analysis on it.
Yeah,
That's what
and
you're
look, you
talking
have to
about.
do an entire life cycle
Yeah.
analysis, right?
Yeah.
That's the only fair comparison. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen anybody do that here in the US, but that's it. That interests me.
Well, the US would be better, right? Because Poland is the worst possible grid because it's 98% coal, right?
Right.
So
Right.
the US is mixture of wind and gas, mainly gas.
Yeah.
The reason a lot of people think that gas-powered cars are better than electric is because companies like Exxon and their peers have spent hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars over a very long period of time to make you think that. And
Hmm.
that money has been well spent because people do think that. And if and like the state of New York at the moment is suing Exxon over this misinformation, and they're probably going to win. So we as humans, sadly, have been indoctrinated for years into thinking things like children are mining nickel for batteries and it's really evil, right? And actually, the truth is, children are mining nickel for electric vehicles. But that is nothing compared to we always say to people, if you think that's bad, have you ever been to a downstream oil and gas location? Like
Yeah,
there's some
I
pretty
know.
awful stuff happening there, right?
I know. Have you thought about what the future is going to be for hydrogen, for example? I mean, I just read a
Yep.
report that there's not enough lithium in the world to go around, and there's
By
a
the
lot
way,
of work.
that's another. Just on pause on that a minute. Lithium is one of the most commonly available materials in the world, right?
Hmm.
So if you ever read a report like that, right, scroll down to the bottom of it, look at who
Okay.
wrote it, and look at who's paying the person who wrote that, right?
Okay.
And I do that quite a lot, right?
So
Because
that's
actually,
that's so you're
yeah,
saying that's not true.
it's just not true. Like
Oh,
we
that's good to
know, like
know.
the hardest things around batteries are nickel and cobalt, and the world needs to open about another 80 mines to be able to get all of the rare earth metals that we need. That's going to happen slower than we need, right? That's an
Hmm.
absolute fact. And it's going to need governments to get involved and speed up the opening of these mines. And these mines, by the way, can be incredibly green. We're working with a mine called Mali in Tasmania at the moment. It's running off hydroelectricity. It's creating very clean cobalt. So all of that can happen. But when you read articles like there isn't enough, they're either ill conceived or somebody paid for that article to be there.
There's a bias there.
There's a huge bias.
Yeah.
And there are all these foundations that have names like the Friendly Earth Foundation. But actually when you look at who's putting the money in, it's oil and gas.
What is your perspective on the role businesses play in addressing climate change?
So it's all about business, right? It's
Right.
government. Like the two people that can have the most impact are businesses and government. And our view is governments are going to move too slow, and so it's up to business to move quick. And we believe businesses, and we know that businesses are moving much faster than they were.
And we also see businesses, here in the U.S. voluntarily, because we don't have the mandates you have in Europe. And a lot of the stuff that's happening here in the U.S. is on a voluntary basis and coming from the grassroots level, actually. And we see businesses here voluntarily, and probably as a result of pressure from the consumers, they're making changes on their own, which I think is very positive.
Yeah, the other thing, I think there's consumer pressure, there's government pressure with carbon taxes and other things. There's incentives like in the US with the Inflation Reduction Act, which is
Right,
brilliant for
right.
making change. But also there's another change that has happened that people haven't noticed as much, and that is that the leadership team of the largest corporations in the world is getting younger, right? So it used to be kind of much older people who grew up with, loving certain things about, they have very nostalgic about oil and gas and muscle cars and all this stuff. And now the age of leaders is younger. It's in their 50s, in their 60s. And also it's moving more from male to female. And
Hmm.
these people give a shit more.
Yeah. Hmm.
They wake up in the morning and they just care more about the planet. They worry about their children. They worry about their grandkids. And that's having an impact, right? So we talk to the chief executives and the people who work in ESG for these big corporations, and they just don't want this to happen anymore. And that's probably one of the bigger impacts. And it's not really discussed as much as some of the other things. Right? People care more.
Yeah, you know what? I'm seeing the same thing, and it's our generation that is actually the deniers, and where I'm seeing, when in places where I speak, I'm seeing if there's the younger generation, they understand it. And the older generation, you have to really start from the here in the US anyway. We're kind of way behind a lot of things you're doing in Europe there. But it's my generation that I have to start from the beginning about climate change, where the younger generation is they already get it,
Yeah,
and they're really concerned about it, and they want to do something about it, and they understand if nothing's done about it, it's just going to be a disaster, for
yeah,
generations to come, so
yeah. If people, it used to be that if you were in a bar and you said, "Hey, I'm working in climate change," they would just say, "You're some kind of weird hippie. I don't really
yeah.
want to be on the same side of the bar." Whereas in the last 5 years, if you're the guy in the bar and you're saying climate change is a lot of rubbish, you're just a weirdo in the corner that nobody wants to be around.
Yeah, I see a change happening too, and that's very positive. How do you believe we can balance our desire for convenience and the need to make sustainable choices?
I guess when we wake up in the morning, that's the main thing we focus on, right? And
Hmm.
our message, as I was saying earlier, is you don't have to suffer for your cause, right? You can live a much better life if you're moving towards climate change. And let's just cover that in the four areas we've been talking about: commercial buildings, factories, transport, and meat, right? So because they're the big problem areas, if I'm in a commercial building and that commercial building is more efficient, then it's going to be better at making sure that the heating and cooling it's not overheating, it's not overcooling. So the building is way more comfortable. If the building is using renewable energy, then you don't know, you're just in your office, right? You
Right,
don't know whether it's renewable or not. Likewise, in my house, if my house is better insulated, then there aren't cold areas or hot areas in my house. It's just much more comfortable. And again, if I'm buying renewable energy, what do I care, right? It's renewable energy. It's over the next 10 years, renewable energy is going to be cheaper. In my house and in my office, I'm more comfortable, right? If I'm buying stuff from a factory, the stuff I'm buying is going to be cheaper. If they're saving $140 million more on energy a year, then the stuff I like to buy is cheaper, right? And then on the stuff I'm buying, people are moving away from plastic crap more and more, right?
right.
They don't want that stuff anymore. They want something that's better engineered and is more sustainable. So it's not like I'm having to suffer for my stuff if the factories that produce it are producing it way more efficiently and way more responsibly. And then on transport, if you're out there and you're saying electric cars are a load of rubbish, then you clearly have never driven a Tesla, right?
Right.
So, people who say to me, I just like my 8 liter, whatever it is, I'm like, and they're like, save me from Elon Musk and all his cars. I'm like, clearly you've never sat in one of these cars because these things are rocket ships, right?
Yep.
And so nobody is suffering driving a Tesla. Finally, meat. I'm not one of those people who says, hey, everybody should be a vegan, right? I don't eat meat, but that's just my preference. And
Right.
I sit with people all the time who like a good steak. So how are we going to solve meat, right? And it's the same as any other technology. There's a technology out there called cell ag, cellular agriculture, right? And it's where you take a cell from your favorite steer, your favorite cow, and you put it into a bioreactor. You turn it on, and it spits out a burger. It's cleaner than a burger that you would buy in any fast food restaurant. It's much healthier for you. It tastes exactly the same, and it's 95% less carbon. And we didn't kill anybody to get it, right?
Yeah.
And this technology is available now, but by 2025, it'll be mass market. for people who say to me, well, I don't want to eat a burger that was grown in a stainless steel bucket, I say to them, would you like to go for a trip to the abattoir that killed that cow? Because I guarantee you, you're going to be eating a burger out of a stainless steel bucket after you've been to an abattoir.
Yeah.
You need to see what happens to your burger before you put it on your plate. And so our view is life is just better with all this new clean tech stuff in every possible way. And that's
Right.
our message.
Yeah, and I also believe that it's not an inconvenience either, and I do believe that there's a lot of improvement. We see that in the building industry, that the houses, they're much more comfortable to live in, and you have now, with building science, there's things that we have developed, with proper air exchange. We're building
Mm-hmm.
buildings tighter, but we have
Absolutely.
the science to show that the air exchange, the proper air exchange is there, and we can actually change that. So for people who have
Absolutely.
allergies, or they're more susceptible to disease, we
Mm-hmm.
can increase that air exchange, and people who don't, we can cut it back. So there's
Yep.
science now that we have that we didn't have 20 years ago.
You
So
know, and even in my life, like I'm lucky enough that I've made a couple of bucks, right? So
right.
we've got it's late here in Ireland, so I'm in my house right now. So we've got one house here in the mountains near the capital. We've got another house by the beach, a couple of hundred
Hmm.
kilometers away, right? This house I'm in is about 25 years old, and it's leaky. It costs a fortune to heat. There's cold spots in the house that nobody wants to be in. And then our house on the beach was only finished about 6 months ago. It's got the latest insulation, it's got a heat pump, it's got solar. You
Right.
walk into that house all the time. I looked it up the other day. It's not a small house, right? It costs 90 cents a day to heat this house, right? This
That's
house.
great.
There's no cold spots in the house. You wander everywhere in your t-shirt. It's really comfortable. So when people say climate change to me, and we all have to suffer, I just go, we just need to move as fast as we possibly can towards these solutions.
Yeah, I'm doing a project at my own house now, and it's a proof of concept, and I've invented the means and methods of construction, and the goal is to be fossil fuel free, and I'm almost there, so
Mhm.
there's a lot of things that are happening today, and a lot of people focusing on these things, and I think that's all great.
Absolutely.
Can you share your views on those who are failing the planet or shirking their responsibility in making change?
Look, I don't think there's anybody bad out there. I think there are people who are unaware about how serious this is or choose to be unaware. They're normally a bit more unhappy than the rest of us. Um,
Hmm.
and and I guess our job is to show people the way, and show people how brilliant this can be, and then not focus on that so much. And also, I think the amount of people who don't care about this is a lot less. There's a lot more people who care about this now and want to solve it than there's ever been. The amount of people who come to us who've worked in technology companies and they just say, you know what, I'm leaving the technology company I'm working with. I want to work with you guys because I want to make a difference here. I'm very worried about this. And so look, I think there's less and less people, and every day I think people wake up and realize that a change needs to happen and they're moving towards it.
I think there's a lot more media today that are focusing on all of the issues, including all the environmental issues that we're facing. So I
Mm-hmm.
think education is a huge part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Something I'm involved in, and
Mm-hmm.
I think it's having an impact.
Absolutely.
What advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs who want to make a positive impact on the world?
I guess two bits of advice. Elon Musk says being an entrepreneur is like chewing glass and staring into the abyss. Um, and so, like, be careful. You look at the guy with the fancy houses and the fancy cars, and you say, "I want to be like him." But just understand that, like, this is not an easy journey. But then also, having heard that, and if you're still going, well, I want to play this game. then just begin. Everyone talks about, well, I need a strategy and I need a business plan. Look, how everybody starts is they don't know everything. They don't know what the right business model is and product market fit and all that. So they just go out and take a step, and you're going to screw it up, right? Spoiler alert.
Yep.
So just start screwing up faster, and get on with it, and you'll get there.
Yeah, and learn from your mistakes, and I did the same thing, and I didn't, I just stepped out there and did it, and I made plenty of mistakes, but every mistake I made, I learned from it, so
Yep.
and that made me better. That's great. I enjoyed this conversation, and thank you for coming on.
I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
You're welcome. And you can find out more about Norman's work at CoolPlanet.io. That wraps up another episode of Decarbonize the World. I hope you enjoyed the show. And if you did, make sure you take a second to subscribe so you automatically get my new shows when they drop. Also, if you have a minute, I'd love if you left me a review so more folks like yourself can discover the show. Until next time, take care.
This has been Decarbonize the World with Frank Deline. To connect with Frank and to learn more about clean energy, reducing fossil fuels, and increasing profits, go to frankdeline.com. Decarbonize the World is a production of Advantage Audio.